I think I'd like to ask you, first of all, if you've gotten into any problems because of your lack of familiarity with the English language. You're laughing here. What's happened to you?
Well, I found at first that Americans talk too quickly. Mm-hmm. And there is such something fun about American language. It's only in my mind. I heard a boy talking about money, about something he get, and he said, I got 20 bobs. When I was in England, I learned that bob means policeman, so I was quite surprised to see what he was doing with 20 policemen.
Well, I find that the Americans talk really much with initials, and I sometimes really get lost because I don't understand what initials are. Well, TV, pretty soon I could catch up that it's television, but sometimes you really get lost.
We do have that bad habit, I'm sure.
Yeah, you do.
How about you, Jayantha?
Well, I have not experienced any real difficulty, but one of the things that I did come across was that once I was invited to go splunking, and I didn't really know what it meant until I found out later on that it meant cave exploring.
What about some slang expressions that you've got?
Well, flunk to fail is one of the expressions which I have come across which was unfamiliar to me. Then also, when you want to say that you are being impudent, you say that he's getting fresh. And then being on the ball is also another unfamiliar expression.
Magoob, have you had any?
Well, my own trouble with the American language is the slang. The slang expressions which you meet now and then. It is obviously that the Americans are going to Americanize the English language, for I have never heard such words as Yanks, for example, meaning Americans, guys, meaning men, or old hat, or warmed over cabbage, meaning something old or out of date, particularly new to me.
Well, in Israel, when you want to say that it's really out of date, you say, well, you aren't discovering America. America was discovered long ago.
Well, that we say in Yugoslavia, the same for...
You do?
Yes.
When you mean that...
When we mean that something is well known and somebody talks as it's something new, you know, we say you are not discovering America.
And that's the same way you do it in Israel?
It's strange enough, it's obviously the same in Arabic. When you want to say something is out of date, or when you hear something which has been told before, you say America has been discovered before.
Yeah. Well, I think we have half an international language, at least international slang.
We must ask the other kids in the group if this is true. 33 countries.
Yeah, but something... It's not true about Ceylon.
Oh, well.
Sorry to introduce a note of disparity.
Before we get off the subject of language, we really have to disabuse you, Mirka. The boy didn't say 20 bobs. He said 20 bucks.
Bucks?
B-U-C-K-S.
Oh. Well, I understood it was 20 bobs.
Let's run. I want to know the languages each of you speak. Now, Magoob, you speak English, Arabic, and...
Dardi.
What's that? Dardi?
Well,
how do you spell it?
It's a colloquial language, D-A-R-D-O-I, Dardi.
D-A-R-D-O-I.
Yeah. But
is it a written language?
It is.
Does it have much literature?
No, not much, but it has some literature.
But in school, what do you speak?
Arabic.
Arabic, always. And Daphne, what languages do you speak?
Well, I speak English, Hebrew, and a little bit of Arabic, and perhaps a little of French.
Is that normal in Israel to learn Arabic?
Yes, it's compulsory 3 years, and apart from that, there are faculties who take only Arabic, Arab manners, literature, geography, and history, all just connected with Arab, just whole faculties who take them, and there are quite a few who take it.
But Arabic is compulsory for 3 years in your school?
For 3 years, it's in my school, I learned it for 3 years. I don't say what I know now, but at least it's compulsory.
Have you tried speaking Arabic with any of the students in the forum group from Arab countries?
No, I didn't. It wasn't too easy, but I hope I will be able to.
I wonder if any of the neighboring Arab countries, neighboring Israel, have Hebrew as a compulsory language.
No, well, that's, I would say, they're really the bad position because all the Arab countries ignore Israel and ignore all what is connected with Hebrew and Israel. And that's why they really don't. As we really look forward to peace with them and we want close relationship, we think that even if we get peace, I mean, what's peace without any common language? I think it will just blow away without doing any good, and that's why we really try to get closer to them. Of course there are many Arabs in the country, and that's we want to be with them also.
Mirka, you speak Serbo-Croatian and what else?
Yes, and English, and a little bit of Russian. I learned Russian at school, and
For how many years did you?
Well, for 8 years, but I didn't have a chance to practice it, so I read it and I can understand it.
Did you obtain a better understanding of the Russian people by reading Russian?
Well, through the books I read from Russian literature, I get imagination of that people. I think that Russians are people who have a great love to the men, you know, and they are very strong-natured people, and they really know how to sacrifice themselves for the goal which they have. They showed it through their revolution, through the war, First World War.
This you can also learn by read by translations, but of course to read the book in its source is the best thing. That's why learning languages is so wonderful, really.
You know, the French have a wonderful expression. They say, traduire, c'est trahir. To translate is to betray. Can you think of any proofs in your own languages that are, when you translate, that you really betray the meaning?
Yeah, I think the Quran, our holy book in Islam, has been translated to English, and when I read the English translation, it is just nothing besides the original Arabic. I mean, in Arabic it has just dazzling beauty, and it can converse you to Islam even if it is a beautiful language. And when you read it in English, it is just something that is distorted.
Yes,
I mean, the beauty of the language is not there at all.
Yes, I don't think any translation, however excellent it is, can really capture the spirit of the original form it is written in. And it is always better to read the original rather than the translated form.
That's making your point that you made at the beginning, that, that both of you made at the beginning, that people miss so much if they don't learn another language.
I had a trouble with that translating from my language in English. So it was with borrow and land.
With borrow and land?
Yes.
Well, what's so
we
difficult
have only
about
one
that?
word for borrow and land. And I asked once, will you borrow me your book? And I didn't know that it's not correct. So they said me that I have to say, may I borrow your book, or will you lend me your book?
It does seem
Something
sort of
new,
silly.
you know. I learn English.
Tell me, is Russian compulsory for 8 years for all Yugoslav students?
No, it's not compulsory. You can choose. In high school, you have to take 2 languages, and you may choose Russian, French, German, English. In some schools, Italian, but it's very new. So I chose Russian and English.
If a student were going to have to choose either Russian or English, suppose he was going to choose Russian, what would be the reasons why he would prefer to study Russian over English in Yugoslavia?
Well, it might be that the reason is that Russian has many similarities with our language, and it's easier to learn it. You know, it's Slav language as our language is Slav language. So it's in a way easier, in a way very difficult.
Could you tell us anything about the percentage of students that will be learning Russian compared to the percentage that are learning English now?
Oh, I don't
well, in
know
your
that.
school, for example.
Well, in my school, we had 4 classes, you call it homerooms, which learn Russian, and from that it's about 100 students, and from that number, half of them, more than half, learned in the same time English, and the rest French.
Mm-hmm.
So that you see, it's majority learned Russian.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, have you had any experience with language teaching in American high schools? You've been in a couple of different high schools now, each of you.
Yes, well, I don't really think that we should ignore the Americans. They do also quite a lot in languages. Well, I think I saw that they were learning French, Latin, Spanish, and German. But something very, very strange is that after the second year, about half of the percentage just drops, and only half of them go on. Latin, they usually take only for 2 years, and as I've spoken to them, they say that it just gives them the wonderful basic of English. And then French, they just go on a little bit, only a few of them, and Spanish, all the pupils who go on really like it. Well, that's their own taste, but they really like it, and they say that if they'll go to a Spanish-speaking country, they'll be able to pick their language after 6 months because they had this basic in school. And I think that's very important, because once you have another foreign language, then you can just, you know something different from your own, and then you can just imagine how people in other places just live and speak.
By the way, what language is the most widely spoken in the world?
Well, I think Chinese is the most widely spoken, but because
agree with that?
I don't think so. I think it is English that is most widely spoken. Perhaps there are the most number of Chinese.
Yes, that's exactly. Of course, English.
Well, there are two things there. English the most widely spoken, but most people, more people in the world speak Chinese than any other, about 500,000. What other languages are high up there?
Hindi?
Hindi, yes. As a matter of fact, I think Hindi and Russian tie.
Yeah.
And then Indonesian. What languages do you think our high school students should take, and why?
Well, as far as I am concerned, I think that they should take Arabic too, besides. Because Arabic is a rich language, is deep and expressive and fluent too, and I think it is a beautiful language to speak. And besides, we have our ancient, traditional, culture. You find the Arabic history is more or less it is cultural history. You find many philosophers and many poets, and they are great. They are well known. Such as Omar al-Khayyam, for example. I have seen much more of his work translated into English.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I was just thinking, wonder what the world would be like today if 15 years ago every student in American high schools had been forced to take 2 or 3 years of Arabic.
I just know as much as I know, and I don't think it would change a lot.
I think at least the problem pointed out just in the opening of the speech is that the American foreign policy, or the United States Information Service outside, is having a problem in the Middle East because only 2 officials out of 50 speak Arabic. I think if only 50 years ago that they have been speaking Arabic for 3 years each in school, then there would be no problem at least. They'll find the Arabic people understanding their foreign policy. Just in concern of the Middle East question now.
Is it true that the most important things about a people and a culture are sometimes those that cannot be translated? Do you think that's a fair?
It's possible that it is so. There are so many things now. For instance, in translations, they don't really capture the spirit of some works which is the most important part of the particularly literary work.
I gather you're disagreeing sharply with Mahgoub then. He at the beginning said he thought Americans were lucky because they didn't have to learn a foreign language, and you were...
I disagree with him.
Well, I think it is because if you encourage the Americans to study other foreign languages, then they discourage the other people to study English. And if you want to have one international language in order to make for international peace, then you must make more people to study one language. And I think English is in the most suitable position now to be studied by the whole world.
I want to be sure I understand you. Just a minute, then you can go on. What you're saying is we should be stubborn enough to keep on speaking English and not learning foreign languages. Because if we're more willing to learn foreign languages, then English would lose its position of being almost an international language. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I say. Not only the Americans, but all the English-speaking countries should keep speaking English, so that more and more people will begin to study English in order to contact with the English-speaking countries, and I think they are the more progressive part of the world. So that if you begin to learn the other foreign languages, then they will not find themselves in a position which necessitates they're studying English.
Well, I think that there isn't any country in the world, almost, I'm not sure, I haven't traveled, unfortunately, but they don't learn English. But what do you think about the Esperanto, which was was supposed to be an international language? Its basis were very simple. They thought that it would be a language which everyone would speak. The writing would be with English letters or Latin, and you write it just exactly as you hear it. You don't have to do it like in English that you have to learn the spelling and to sweat on it a very long time. But you just write it as you hear it. And their plan was to teach everyone in the world this Esperanto, which would be an international language. And then, unfortunately, this thing failed. What would be your opinion about why it failed, or can a thing like that be at all?
Yes, it is regrettable that Esperanto had failed, but perhaps it was rather impracticable since you were trying to teach the whole world a new language instead of using a language which is already in usage as one of the world languages.
But it wasn't really a new language, because there were so many things from English and from Latin, and it was the most, I think that a person who hears it knows many languages, just many words. He understands many words that just without thinking, because it's really the most common language. But it failed, and I think an international language would be a very suitable thing for our world.
How would an international language contribute towards world peace, do you think? To what extent?
Well, I don't think that can be the cause for world peace, but I'm sure that after world peace is reached, after we reach the position where the whole world is in peace, I think that can do a lot, because it can bring many nations to closer connections. And I wouldn't say that would be really the cause, because a language can't be really the whole thing. I'm afraid politics is the thing which really plays the biggest part. But I do think it would do a lot to the world.
Wait a minute, Milka, would you want to...
Well, I think that language can help a lot to make better understand the people.
Well, what
in the
language
other
would you
one.
choose if Esperanto is not going to be practical?
Well, I would choose some international language.
Which?
I don't know, maybe.
Well, I'm asking
Might
you to
be
choose
Magu's
now.
language. He mentioned his language, which would be consisted of bu, shu, sha, all these sounds, you know,
What's
which
that?
would be very easy to learn.
I think if Mago explains his language, it would be a very
You got a
good.
new language for us, Magu?
I think the best language for to be an international language is the richest. And when I say the richest, I mean, for example, the language which has many words. Those words mean what they say, mean what they sound like. For example, when the English words buzz, crack, crush, these words sound like what they mean.
Magu,
And then
how do you
if
say
you want
buzz in Arabic?
Well, we say it's...
Well, that's
also-
almost
it's
it. How do you
almost
say it
the
in
same.
Hebrew, Daphne? How do you say buzz?
Also, something like it.
How about
In
Sinhalese?
the same, you make the
Yeah,
same
the
line.
same.
So you see,
Well-
we practically got...
Then you see, this is international now. We have the same word in all 4 languages here. And then I think if you can just formulate a language out of these words which just mean like what they sound, and then we try to find also the language which has more figures of speech, similes and metaphors. And I think we'll have quite a practical language.
You still took Mirka out of a difficult position, though. What language do you choose, Mirka, if you've got to choose one of these major 4 or
You
5?
forced me to say I would choose Serbo-Croatian language, do you?
Well,
No,
I would
no,
choose
I mean,
Hebrew.
of the major ones, if you had to choose between the major languages in the world, which we've said were Chinese, Russian, English, Hindi, and Indonesian, no, Spanish came in there, and Indonesian, what would be the best one to choose?
Well, for me, because I speak Slav language, the best one would be Russian. I learned Russian so long time, and I find it very, language which express so many things so tenderly and so fine.
What would the rest of you say?
if I'm forced to commit myself, I think English would be a most suitable choice.
Do you want to explain why?
Well, I think as it is, we have granted the fact that it is the most widely spoken language. And if at all we are to choose a language which is to be an international language, it would be the best choice.
Anybody disagreeing?
No, I think that
I don't-
unfortunately that will be the language.
You are happy
Why do you
with
say
that?
unfortunately,
Well,
Daphne?
because I think that to speak in Hebrew it would be much easier for me.
But does the fact that you have an international language mean that your own national language will be sort of going to obscurity?
No, not at all. I'm sure that none of the nations will be prepared to give up their own languages, because language, I think, is the only thing which really expresses the feelings of the whole nation. I think that, for instance, I can take the Judaism as an example. I think that the Hebrew, which brings to the religion, or the religion which brings to Hebrew, more rather, is the only thing which has kept this Jewish nation 2,000 years in existence. If there wasn't the language, then I'm afraid I wouldn't think that there would be the nations too.
Or the problems?
Well, yes.
Can each of you explain in a sentence or persuade American students why they should study more foreign languages? What are the major arguments you would give?
I think the more languages you know, the more privileged you are. I mean, you have so many avenues open to you, so many cultures that are ready for you to experience at first hand, and that is one of the most important things you gain by knowing a foreign language.
In a way, that's right. But in a way, for instance, you'll take Yugoslavia. An American for a student learns Yugoslavian. Now, what does it come? He knows another one nation of the hundreds which are on Earth. Of course, you can learn another language which is more widely spoken. But I think there will be this argument that of people who, perhaps lazy people who wouldn't like to learn too many languages, that would say that another one language you learn, you get to know only one country, one people.
Yes, so that should encourage people to learn more languages and get to know more cultures.
Well, I'm sort of a genius which can learn so many languages.
I want this.
Well, I think that if you learn a native language of some people, you don't get known only with the people. You get known with their habits, with their folks, culture, national dances, national songs, which is such a rich things and such a beautiful things you can find in it.
I don't think it is all Americans to study foreign languages, but if you have certain, ambition to become a historian, for example, or to study ancient culture, you should study the language of that particular country in which you want to make your research. But if every average American is going to study foreign languages, then there is no reason why should we encourage other people to study English. Because
I'm sorry, Margot, our time is almost up. You've been eloquent on this subject of language. I'm sure if anybody listening spoke Arabic or Hebrew or Sinhalese or Serbo-Croatian as well as you do, they could have a great deal to be thankful for. We won't forget that you are translating all the time you speak, and all of you speaking in a foreign language are an inspiration. Thank you very much. Next week, we'll be talking about roots of prejudice.